Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Medal of Honor Airborne for PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. This review is coming to you courtesy of Baddox96. He sent me this, so thank you. It is greatly appreciated. This is a first-person shooter in yet another game in the Medal of Honor franchise, and this one's effectively the PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3 version of Medal of Honor Vanguard, which was the same kind of premise, but it did end up being a different game. The weird thing about Airborne is that unlike other Medal of Honor games where they're extremely linear and you follow a very, very strict path and you don't really have any choice in what you're doing, this one does give you some choice. So the question is, does this game being different from other Medal of Honor games in some ways make it more interesting or what? Well, as far as the presentation goes, it's a very, very, very mixed bag. On the one hand, you have the fact that this runs in Unreal Engine 3, which in itself should be a good thing, right? Brown and gray and realistic. Yet another one with almost no color in it whatsoever. Ugh, I'm so sick of that. Anyway, the weird thing about the visuals in this game is that while they are better than previous Medal of Honor games as far as the quality goes, that's not really saying all that much. The previous Medal of Honor games really didn't look all that good. And when you get to Airborne, you have a lot of weird issues here and there with graphics glitches. In fact, those happened quite a lot. There was a lot of clipping, there was a lot of really weird issues where the enemies would get caught on things and it would stretch out their arms to ludicrous proportions and they'd just bounce all over the place because of it, or you'd blast an enemy and it would launch them because they ragdoll and everything. So the graphics ended up looking pretty ridiculous. It really doesn't help that the texture quality is rather low. The shaders are somewhat off, and the characters themselves look really plasticky. So that really doesn't help this game as far as its visuals go, and it also really doesn't help that a lot of the animations just look really awkward and clunky. In fact, the guys holding their weapons, they don't even look like they're holding their weapons properly. It just looks stupid. But that said, the sound design is better. The sound effects themselves are especially noteworthy considering that they, like in Medal of Honor Pacific Assault, they finally decided, hey, we're not going to just recycle every single sound effect from every prior Medal of Honor game. And they actually got some new sound effects. And they work okay, actually. They're not great, but they work okay. And it's certainly good thing to have sound effects that don't make you feel like you're playing a game from the late 90s. So, when you combine that with the pretty decent voice acting for the most part, although the German voices end up sounding kind of silly sometimes, and there's a lot of really weird accents going on with the Americans. I'm not really sure what they're going for, and in fact I think some of the voices for the Americans actually aren't Americans voicing them, which makes no sense whatsoever, because they end up sounding kind of ridiculous when that happens. But the voice acting in general is decent. It's not particularly great, but it gets the job done, and it's certainly not horrible. And then you have the music, which feels completely recycled from all of the previous Medal of Honor games, in what I call generic World War II music. You hear it in just about every World War II thing ever. And it's the same old thing, over and over and over again. It's tedious. Now, it really doesn't help that we had that massive influx of World War II games, and so this sort of thing just got really annoying, but they could have tried something different as opposed to just having, oh, we're basically just going to recycle stuff from the previous Medal of Honor games. But as annoying as that gets, what really matter are the story and the gameplay. And the story in this is that you are Boyd Travers, a member of the 82nd Airborne Division, and you are fighting various battles in World War II. That's it. That's the entire story right there. That there is no actual overarching story to this game. You're just fighting several battles in World War II, and you're parachuting in as the Airborne. That's it. They do throw in a crap ton of World War II game and movie cliches, and it gets extremely annoying. The entire time these things are happening, you're just sitting there going, really? You're going for this? Come on, guys. And it makes the game end up being really cliche and just feels generic, which is weird because the game actually isn't very generic. The gameplay itself is one of the most interesting aspects of this game. You're playing as the Airborne, and you're doing exactly what you'd expect the Airborne to do, which is parachuting into locations and just go wreaking havoc, basically. When each mission starts, you actually jump out of a plane, and your parachute activates, and then you get to steer it. And this brings up something that's actually very interesting about this thing. It's a pretty non-linear game. You do get a series of objectives, but you're basically allowed to go and complete those objectives as you see fit. And this is a stark contrast from all of the previous Medal of Honor games, which were ridiculously linear. They were effectively on rails, and you just moved along those rails. Whereas Medal of Honor Airborne, while it does have quite a bit of linearity to it, most of the time you're actually able to just choose what you want to go for when you want to go for it. Now, that does present some problems here and there, because you may not know what exactly it is you're supposed to do, and you may not be able to go along a certain path that you feel like you might be able to go along because they decided to put an invisible wall there or something like that. But that non-linearity is pretty refreshing, because Medal of Honor is not something you really expect to have non-linear gameplay. It also allows you to choose a loadout going into a mission. You get 2 weapons and then your sidearm, which throughout almost the entirety of the game is going to be the 1911. If you actually get to the second to last or last levels of the game, you can also get a C96, but the thing with that is you have to find it in the second to last level, and in the last level you're finally able to actually select it in your loadout. There actually aren't all that many weapons in this game, and they've done a really weird thing with how they actually function. And that is, these weapons operate on Counterfire Mechanics. If you don't know what I mean by that, I'm basically going to have to demonstrate it to you. The idea is that if you're firing from the hip, then you'd expect to have bullets go pretty much wherever the crosshair is, but spread out over time, right? Because that's a pretty standard mechanic in these sorts of games. But when you aim down your sights with these sorts of games, you also expect the bullets to go where you're pointing your sights. That doesn't happen in Medal of Honor Airborne. Not all the time, anyway. Because the game operates on Counterfire Mechanics. The way that works, even when you're aiming down your sights, even though it does make the grouping tighter than it does when you're firing from the hip, it still has a cone of fire even with that aiming down the sights, even on the rifles. Now, the cone of fire is much, much smaller on the rifles, but when you're using, say, the Thompson, when you first get the Thompson, you can't hit much with it, because that cone of fire really interferes with your aiming. When you actually unlock the first upgrade for it, which is the foregrip, suddenly it tightens the cone of fire enough that you can actually hit what you're aiming at. Now, that's kind of a problem, because it pretty much makes the game unfair. It makes it very grindy. And while it's really not that big of a problem to upgrade your weapons over time, it might take you a mission or two to do it, but it's usually not that big of a deal. Even though that's the case, it still gets extremely annoying when you can't hit what you're aiming at, even when your sights are right on. And if you saw my How to Fail on this game, you actually saw that in practice, where I was aiming directly at the guy manning the machine gun, and I should have been able to hit him, but I couldn't, because the game said no. That sort of thing happens all the time. And it really does interfere with your playing the game, because you might think your sights are right on, but nope, apparently not, because the game just decided, hey, no, you're not going to hit them. Gee, thanks, game, that's exactly what I wanted. So that upgrade mechanic gets rather annoying, and it especially gets annoying when you upgrade certain weapons and find out that upgrading them was a really bad idea. Because, say the MP40 for instance, your first upgrade is fast mags, which pretty much doubles your reload speed. Great, right? Then you get the upgrade for dual mags, which gives you, instead of 32 round magazines, you get 64 round magazines. And you get the bonus of the double reload speed anyway, which is pretty good, right? Final tier upgrade for that thing is a knife, which you can only use on the MP40, I might add. That doesn't even make sense. You're just sitting there like, really? All that for a knife? And this is the case with actually several of the weapons. The final tier upgrades for them really aren't that good. Like the STG-44, for instance, the final tier upgrade for that is a scope, which you're not going to be using because the STG-44 isn't really all that accurate at medium to long range, oddly enough. It's most accurate when you're close enough to actually be able to see what you're aiming at. And it's particularly the case because that thing isn't actually all that accurate to begin with because of the Counterfire Mechanics. You see where this is a problem. And then other upgrades just don't even make sense. So, you have the knife. You have a bayonet upgrade for your shotgun being the final tier upgrade for that. It's pretty ridiculous. Not only that, but it takes quite a while to actually get these unlocked. So, in theory, it's a good idea, but it's just really, really badly implemented. And it becomes a very large detriment on the game. And then you have the actual meat of the gameplay, which is just running around, completing objectives, blasting Germans and Italians in the first level. And over time, you'll find that enemies get tougher and tougher, and if you were playing on hard like I did, then you found out that very quickly that the game hates you. Because these guys are pinpoint accurate. Even on the first level of the game, they are pinpoint accurate from pretty much impossible angles that you cannot possibly hope to actually hit them at, but they can hit you at just fine. So get used to dying a lot. Particularly get used to dying when you get to the end game, because the last two levels of the game introduce the Storm Elite, which are guys that are heavily armored, bullet sponges, with MG42s that they are pinpoint accurate with, firing from the hip. They can take multiple headshots before going down. You can actually take the M18 recoilless rifle and hit them in the head with it, and it will not bring them down. And that is the most powerful weapon in the entire game. This can happen. And in the second to last level, they introduce only 2 of them. But in the last level, they throw 20 of them at you. In addition to all the other soldiers running around with STG-44s. And throwing grenades around and all that sort of thing. So, the end game gets outright infuriating, but even the earlier stages of the game are outright infuriating, because there's no consistency to it. You'll get shot from one guy and it might do barely any damage, but then you get shot by another guy using the same gun, and suddenly half your health is gone. And you have to go find health kits to actually fully replenish your health. You do get regenerating health up to a point. You get 4 nodules, I guess, is what you would describe it, or ticks or whatever, as 4 ticks of health. And when you're damaged, if it stays within that tick and it just goes down, say, halfway of that tick, then it will eventually regenerate. But once you have gone through that tick's gone, and you have to go find a health pack to restore it, and each health pack gives you 1 tick of health. Now, most of the time, it's not that big of a problem, because health packs are fairly common. Until you get to about the halfway point of the game, in which case they start being really stingy. And they also start being really, really stingy on ammo, which doesn't really make any sense. So, it gets really weird when, even when you're using German weaponry, you can't find ammo for them, even though the enemy is using the same weapon you are. Doesn't make sense. And so, a lot of this game is spent actually getting extremely irritated at it, rather than actually having fun. And in fact, when I was playing this thing, I didn't have any fun at all. I only got mad at it. Because I didn't feel like I was really playing an FPS so much as I was playing a torture device. I was playing this thing and going, why is this so hard? I mean, yes, I was playing on the hard difficulty, but it shouldn't be nearly impossible. I mean, I have this clip that I'm going to show you where you first encounter the Storm Elite. And I couldn't get out of that situation except for blind luck. And that was what I felt like throughout a lot of this game. It was just I had to get really lucky and not run into a situation where the game just decided, hey, screw you. It also doesn't help that the aiming system's kind of weird. When you aim down your sights in this thing, you are able to lean. Now, you can't lean any other way. You have to aim down your sights first, and then you press the movement keys. Either forward, if you're crouched, then you'll actually raise up, say, over your cover to be able to shoot at the enemy. Or if you move left or right, then you'll just lean left or right. It gets really awkward. It's hard to get used to. But it's good that they actually had aiming in there. The problem being that even when you're leaning, the enemy is able to hit you from basically a mile away with a pistol and do ludicrous amounts of damage. So, that's kind of a problem. Because what you have underneath this cool idea of being able to parachute in and having that non-linearity and the kind of interesting... there's an unlock system. You have some cool design choices, and then a ton of bad ones. And then you have a lot of just outright weirdness. Lots of weird glitches here and there. I did have the game crash on me once, but it wasn't a common occurrence. It's a pretty short game, actually, but because it's so ludicrously difficult, it actually ends up being much longer than it should be. And it's not the good kind of length either. It's the extremely annoying kind of length, particularly when you can't skip the cutscenes at all throughout the entire game. It's just a mess. And it's really unfortunate because I went into this thing and was like, hey, this is interesting. This is different. Maybe the game's good. Maybe this is the first Medal of Honor game I'll actually like. Nope. I ended up hating it. And that's really a shame. So, ultimately, I give Medal of Honor Airborne a 1.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.